Hi, I'm Andy Mack. Welcome to Britain's World War II Weekly, the comprehensive guide revealing week by week the discussions and decisions made by the British War Cabinet and military leaders about how they would steer the nation and empire through the greatest conflict the world has ever experienced. Everything covered is taken straight from the official British War Cabinet records, which are housed at the National Archives in Kew, London. This week we're looking at week 5, the 1st to the 7th of October 1939. The first order of business this week was a continuation of French and British efforts to plan for a German attack on France, and what to do if this attack came through neutral Belgium. In response to General Ironside's assessment of German intentions, which had been discussed the previous week, General Gamelin, his French counterpart, had produced his own report. Broadly speaking, he agreed with the British view that Germany was most likely to attack France, and French intelligence revealed that this may be imminent. Gamelin estimated that the Germans would have 130 divisions at their disposal, against the French 70 and the British 4. If Italy remained neutral, the French could bring an extra 12 divisions from the Italian frontier and North Africa. Gamelin believed that there was little likelihood of a German-Russian offensive alliance, as the Soviets had been able to achieve their aims of territorial expansion so far without coming into the war on Germany's side. He was in accordance with the British view for the need to make plans to move into Belgium should it be attacked. If Germany invaded the Balkans, the French view remained that a powerful Anglo-French expeditionary force should be sent to Salonika in northern Greece, a move that we have seen was not at all favoured by the British. If Italy declared war on the Allies, Gamelin thought that the British view was a bit gloomy, with predictions of the Mediterranean being closed to shipping, and he believed that the combined Anglo-French navies would obtain superiority over the Italian navy to keep the sea open. This report was followed by diagrams illustrating the organisation of the French higher command structures and of the British liaison officers linked to the French field forces. Next up was the ongoing deliberation about possible scenarios in the Balkans. The Allied High Command had identified 4 possibilities. A. Italy neutral, no German attack in southeastern Europe. B. Italy neutral, a German attack in southeastern Europe. C. Italy hostile, no German attack in southeastern Europe. And D. Italy hostile, a German attack in southeastern Europe. Scenario A was the current situation, and due to the difficulties of sending and maintaining armed forces in the Balkans, it was desirable that diplomatic efforts focused on keeping it that way, although the downside was that Germany would retain access to Romanian oil. Scenario B was more difficult, but as long as Italy remained neutral, the Allies would engage Turkish assistance, developing it as a military stronghold, as nothing could be done to stop Germany from overrunning Romania. Scenario C would necessitate a concentration of Allied force against Italy to knock it out of the war. If Italy entered the war, it would most likely invade Greece, and if that happened, the Allies would need the assistance of Turkey and possibly Yugoslavia to help defend Greece and to keep the Mediterranean open to shipping. Scenario D was of course the most threatening, and it was acknowledged that Allied strategy would be faced with a serious problem. If Turkey remained neutral or even hostile, the situation would be very grave, and the best that was hoped for would be to stand fast in Syria, which was a French colony. The report concluded that the Allied policy aims were: A. To hold and wear out strength away from the Western theatre of war. B. To prevent Germany from obtaining control of economic resources in the Balkans. C. Provide strategic cover for Franco-British interests in the Near East, and in particular to close the Mediterranean to enemy ships coming from the Black Sea. D. To prepare a theatre of operations with a view to ultimate offensive operations. E. To furnish visible evidence of our desire to stand by the Franco-British guarantee to Romania and Greece. In order to accomplish these aims, the Allies would rely primarily on diplomacy and economic assistance to maintain Balkan neutrality, but would establish forces in Syria and Egypt for employment should it be necessary. However, there were no forces to spare at the moment, and military resources should not be dissipated on countries which are unlikely to be able to use them to good effect. Should Italy become hostile and Germany attack the Balkans, the only sound strategy would be to reinforce strength rather than weakness. Following on from that was the tabling of a draft report about supplying arms to Turkey. In line with the proposed tripartite agreement between Britain, France and Turkey, the British and French would loan the Turks £15 million in gold and a sterling credit of £4 million to cover the cost of the defence of Thrace. France could send 3 to 4 divisions from Syria, but Britain was in no place to send anything other than a token force. The next matter under discussion were the measures to be taken if Holland and/or Belgium were overrun by Germany. The Belgians had refused the offer of staff talks because they couldn't afford to aggravate Germany. The report contained 18 pages listing the military, industrial and economic assets of both countries, which the British hoped would be denied to Germany if it invaded. These included docks and harbours, gold and bank reserves, stocks of raw materials, especially oil and flax, railway stock, and Dutch inland watercraft. It was stated that neither country had any indigenous supply of raw materials or food, and they would in fact prove in the long run a liability owing to their requirement in feeding stuffs. Neither country had any substantial military assets, and the greater proportion of the Dutch navy was in the Netherlands East Indies. The British hoped to persuade both governments that if they were attacked and in danger of being overrun, to transfer as many raw materials and military assets as possible to Britain or France. Next up was an appreciation of the international situation created by the Russo-German agreement. This was in response to a query from Robert Menzies, the Prime Minister of Australia, who had asked for a clarification of the implications in the case of Russia intervening on Germany's side. After consulting the Foreign Office, the Joint Planning Committee had effectively looked into their crystal ball and prepared a report which concluded that politically, Japan would do nothing to assist Germany or Russia. The USA would do nothing. Italy wouldn't like it, but would join in if they think it's likely to be the winning side. Turkey would not fight Russia. The Balkans were at the mercy of Germany as well as Russia, and couldn't offer serious resistance if both nations invaded. Spain was anti-Bolshevist, but may be influenced by Italy, especially if they thought they would gain Gibraltar and Tangiers. As far as Russia was concerned, the planners thought that the Soviets would try to extend their influence internationally with the abiding aim of spreading world revolution. They would prefer a weak Germany and a British Empire, both exhausted by the struggle. They concluded, "We do not consider that Russia is capable at present of more than a limited war effort. Her military forces are in no shape to conduct large-scale operations against a first-class power outside Russian territory. If Russia stays neutral, her imports to Germany would provide a limited amount of materials to make up German deficiencies, but in the long run, not enough to equal those lost by Allied economic blockade. Russian presence on Balkan borders may keep that region quiet, allowing Germany to concentrate on the Western Front. However, with imports sustaining it, they may refrain from an offensive in winter in hope of securing a negotiated peace. All the Baltic states are likely to fall to Russia without much military action. Finland might resist, but eventually would be forced to give in. This presented no immediate threat to British interests. The Russians are likely to invade Romania and take Bessarabia, but unlikely to attack Turkey. They could threaten Iran, Iraq, and the Anglo-Iranian oil fields. Afghanistan could be open to Bolshevik propaganda and unrest, which could spread to India, meaning Britain would have to reinforce rather than use the Indian army in other theatres. Nothing more was likely in the Far East, but this suited Japan, giving them a free hand in China or elsewhere. The most immediate danger of Russia at war with the Allies was the addition of Russian submarines augmenting the German fleet and operating from German bases, and the threat to the oil fields, which at present have no defence at all. The last matter was a report by the Chiefs of Staff about releasing 72 anti-aircraft guns from the air defence of Great Britain and sending them to cover British forces in France. The British planned to have 2,232 anti-aircraft guns to defend the UK, of which only about 780 were currently available. Although the extra requirements would amount to nearly 10% of the total, these guns could be sent to France at the expense of stripping the defence of ports, docks and airfields in England. Planning was underway for the relocation of these guns should it become necessary. It would take 12 days before they would become operational in France. At the end of each week, the Chiefs of Staff produced a weekly resume. Week 5's reports included: naval forces were sent to South America in response to a report of a German raider. 2 British merchant ships were sunk. To date, 8 neutral ships have been sunk by the Germans, and a Norwegian freighter sank after hitting a British mine off Singapore. There were 992 ships and convoys, none had been sunk. There was a decline in U-boat activity, possibly due to the efficiency of British defensive measures, the bad weather, and the long voyage to take up stations off the Americas. The Germans had announced that all British merchantmen would be regarded as warships, because some were armed with a deck gun, and according to the international law, such vessels could be targeted. It was suspected that Germany had established a U-boat base in the Canaries. Anti-U-boat activities were indecisive. There were no indications that the German surface fleet had left home waters, except the South Atlantic raider reported to be the Admiral Scheer, but this was unlikely due to reliable reports that the ship was seen in Germany. The raider would turn out to be the Graf Spee. In the Western Theatre, 1st Corps and Headquarters troops were taking over the sector allotted to the BEF, and the movements of the 2nd Corps to its assembly area would be complete by the end of the week. There were small-scale actions in the Saar, where French forces had repulsed German efforts to dislodge them. There were now 52 German infantry divisions in the west, although there were no mechanised forces which were thought to be refitting in Germany. The Russian advance in Poland had slowed, probably due to a breakdown in logistics, particularly the supply of petrol. Russian frontline units had good equipment, but the cavalry and infantry were described as an undisciplined rabble. The new Russian frontier in Poland had few military advantages. Under the Russo-German Pact, the supply of Russian raw materials to Germany in exchange for manufactured goods was highly beneficial to Germany. Russian mobilization was occurring across the whole country, not just in the west. The Baltic states were becoming increasingly nervous of the Russian build-up. Russia continued to build up forces along the Romanian border region of Bessarabia. Fortifying work continued in Bulgaria and Turkey, but Italian and Greek forces seemed to be scaling down on the Greek-Albanian border. In the Middle East, Indian troops had arrived at Suez. The Italians had made no extra moves or mobilization. The Japanese kept pressing towards Changsha, and more men were arriving in Manchuria. German forces were quiet, but more were arriving in the Saar. The French continued reconnaissance flights. The RAF continued to reconnoitre roads, railways, and German air dispositions. An encounter between 5 ferry battles and 15 Me-109s ended with 4 battles shot down and the last crashed on landing. 11 Hamptons attacked German naval units. No hits were observed. Leaflet drops continued over Germany. And that's all for this week. Please join me again for the next instalment of Britain's World War II Weekly. Thanks for watching.